The rectangular marquee tool is the next tool in the toolbar. So you can just see rectangular marquee tool. M is how you get to it. If you go here, there's an elliptical marquee tool. And I'm not going to talk about the single row marquee tool or single column marquee tool because I don't do a lot of interface design, so I never use them. Essentially, what these do is they do a single marquee going across the entire canvas. But let's just focus on the rectangular marquee right now and the various different options on it. So let's say we're on this layer, and let's make it a normal rasterized layer just for the sake of simplicity and get rid of all of the other layers because, again, let's keep this as simple as is physically possible. And if we go here, if we just press M to get to the rectangular marquee tool, it creates an active region in the shape of a square. So you can use the move tool to drag this around wherever you want. I'm going to undo that with Control Z. Or, I mean, you could do things like invert the colors. You can make it so you only draw inside of this active region right there. If I were to go to the brush tool with B, I'm not going to explain the concept of active regions here. It allows you to create a square active region. Different options. If you hold down Shift, you can constrain the proportion so it will only be square. If you hold down Alt first, I've never done that. Okay, it does it from the middle. So sometimes if you hold down Alt and Shift at the same time, it does it from the middle as a square if you want to do that. If you hold down Control, it actually makes it so it completely turns into the move tool. So let's say I'm in the middle of using the marquee tool. If I hold down Control, well, it'll just do that right there, and I won't need to switch to the move tool. I can just do it while still using the marquee tool. So, I mean, they're pretty simple right there. Shift constrains, as it always does. Alt makes it go from the center, similar to what happens in Transform. And Control kind of temporarily turns it into the Move tool. Other things to know is if you hold down Shift after you make a selection, you can add to the selection. If you hold down Alt after you already have an active region, you can subtract from the selection. And actually, if you hold down Alt and Shift at the same time, you can create a selection of the section that overlaps. So notice how there's an X there. It's just the section that overlaps right here. So I don't use that all that often. Those options are also located right here, add, subtract, and this is kind of intersect, so Alt and Shift at the same time. Something you can also do is feather the selection. So let's say I wanted a feather of 5 pixels. Here, let me type this in as 5, just hit Enter. And now if I were to do this, I'll hold Control to turn this into the Move tool. Notice right here that there is now a immediate feather of 5 pixels right here on this. And one thing to be aware of if you end up using that right there, the 5 pixels, make sure to set it back to 0. Otherwise, you might spend a while making a good selection, either with the marquee tool or with the lasso tool or one of the others, and then find out that you ended up feathering the edge, so it's completely useless and you need to start over right there. That's no good. There's other things I wanted to say. Let's see, there's different styles. If you want to do a fixed ratio, so 15 by 4, something like that, you can do that. Fixed size, you can make it so it's a specific number of pixels. Use the crop tool to crop. Don't use the marquee tool. But this can be good if you want a particular size. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say is very rarely do you do something like this while keeping it on the same layer. It's much better to copy it and paste it onto another layer because that way you're doing non-destructive editing. See what happened right there? I selected it with the marquee tool. I pressed Control-C and Control-V, and that way it's on its own separate layer. You almost never want to just move it from the same layer because that gets confusing. You know, if I were to then try to move this piece down here, it all moves as one piece and I just have no idea what's going on because I'm an idiot. Control D to deselect. Nothing else all that interesting here. There are options for refine edge that I won't talk about for this. If you right click, you can do things like deselect, select inverse, which is Control Shift Alt I want to say. Control Shift Alt I, or oops. That's not what I wanted. Control. All right, apparently I don't even know what it is. I do use it every so often. I'll use it with masks. There we go. It's just Control-Shift-I inverts the selection. You can feather it from here. You can refine edge from here. I rarely use save selection and make work path because those are confusing options. I'd rather just use masks. Layer via copy. I never use these because just using Control-C and Control-V is so much easier. These are all options that are just, here's another way to do something, but not as good of a way to do something. Free transform, I'll just hit Control-T, transform selection. I will use this, and this allows me me to just transform the selection. Now it's in the selection, but just the selection, enter to commit it. And then I never use fill or stroke. And then 3D extrusion, these are just weirdo options right here, because fill, you can just hit, either the gradient tool or just Alt-Delete. Any of that. The big thing that I'll use the Marquee tool for is creating a square and say hitting Alt-Delete to fill that square with something when it's on a new layer. Control-D to deselect, Control-T to transform, and then I can make this square whatever I want, possibly go to the Move tool, hit just 5 to make it 50% opacity. All sorts of things that you can do with this, but in a nutshell, that's what you can do with the Marquee tool. Elliptical Marquee works the same way. Shift constrains the proportions. Alt makes it go from the center, doing it at the same time. Makes it go from the center and constrain proportions. Shift afterwards to add. Alt afterwards to subtract. Alt and Shift at the same time to get a little bit of an intersect right here. If you want an amazing tutorial of someone who creates illustrations purely with this tool, almost entirely, Bob Saki. I believe that's how you spell his name, Bobsaake. Let me actually just verify that right there. Great game if you ever get a chance to play it. Bob Saki. Oh, there we go. Bob Stocky, Staake. Just do he has an amazing rundown of using the Marquee tool to create illustrations. All right, so that's the Marquee tool.